Hello and welcome to our normal weekly visit, Monday night visit to Project Grey Book. I'm Anthony Frank, I'm your host tonight, the man with the tan, as you can see. I've been out in the garden looking up at the sky, looking for UFOs. We're presented by Comedy Hotspot, as per usual, and powered by joytip.com. As I said, it's episode 3 of our weekly meet and greet with all fans of ufology and also Extra Terrestrial, and no bigger fan than the man himself. He is our very own little green man, and I'm sure he watched the SpaceX launch yesterday. Please give it up for Sir Steve Harris. Hello, Steve.
Hello. Welcome to the show, everybody. This is you do look quite orange there, actually, Anthony. I'm sure you might get a phone call off and asking you to stay indoors for the next 3 days.
Just looking at your teeth, it's a dazzle. You know, I don't know where you bought them from. Exciting.
Hey, these are real. These are real.
Are they? Well, we can say the
same. Yeah.
First off, I'm going to introduce you to our first very special guest that's joined us tonight, Steve. You might know her. She reached the finals of the Southport Comedian of the Year in 2014 and the regional finals of the Funny Women Awards 2017. She uses a cutting, sharp wit with dark humour as she jests about her life as a single mother and the stresses of dating. International author of comedy novel Mr. Wrong and a rising star on the UK's comedy circuit, performing for some of the UK's most respected promoters and Jim Howarth, as well as one half of comedy duo Gin and Comic, which she performs for ladies' afternoons, evenings in private functions, rooms and gin bars throughout the Northwest. Are the gin bars in Lee? Lindsay Davis, come on, give it up.
Not a specific gym bar, but yes. Hi.
Hello, how are you?
Hi, Lindsay.
Today, actually.
Yeah, have you seen anything today?
Hi, I'm okay.
Yeah?
I have been out in the garden, but it's been pretty clear skies today, hasn't it? The odd cloud, but it's too bright to look up. I'm one of these who waits till like 3 a.m, because that's the best time to see stuff like that. 3-4 o'clock in the morning, that's when the planets are the easiest to see. So if I wake up in the middle of the night, I guarantee I'll scan the skies out my bedroom window. I'm very lucky where I live. It's open space.
Yeah, and we're very lucky to have you on the show today, so welcome. Now on to our second guest. We're doubling up this week, aren't we, Steve? Doubling up. He quickly established himself as one of the UK's most exciting young comedians with a silly conversational sense of humour, which has seen him win a host of awards and become a regular at all the finest comedy clubs in the UK and Ireland, as well as performing solo shows in Australia and New Zealand. As you might have seen him on Mock the Week, Dave's One Night Stand, Stand Up for the Week, Russell Howard's Good News, Stand Up Central, Alan Davis's Yet Untitled, Follow the Football, drop those names. And The Guardian has described him as an observational genius, a compelling storyteller, and the list has described him as a natural raconteur, and it's a pleasure to spend an hour in thrall to his talent. Will it be a pleasure to spend 40 minutes in thrall to his talent? Let's find out. Give it up for Carl Donnelly. Hello, Carl. How are you?
Hey.
Good, thanks. How you doing?
I'm very well indeed.
Well, nice.
Where are you calling
Hi,
from?
Carl.
Hey.
I'm in Northwest London, and that was almost my full bio you read out. Everything I've ever done.
Yeah, absolutely. No, there's still more. And also both guests a Project Grey Book. Bang that on your CV after this.
I'm just going top of the list now.
Absolutely, it should be. Well, you're both more than welcome to come back anytime. We'll say that when it gets to 22. As you know, we talk about all things ufology, all things extraterrestrial, all things that are happening in the skies and in space above us at all times. We encourage you, the audience, to get involved as much as you can. If you can comment, you can send in the comment to the email. Check us out on Facebook. Check us out on YouTube. Comment on there. They'll come up here. We'll read them out as much as we can as well. And do let us know where you're watching from as well. Because we'll give you a shout out as well. We like to be multinational and multi-global here at Project Grey Book. Okay, so we're going to kick off first with something that I know, Lindsay, you're obsessed with. When we were having our little debrief this afternoon, mid-tan, you got very excited about Antarctica and specifically, Steve, Admiral Byrd.
Yes.
In a nutshell, who the hell is Admiral Byrd? Why should we know him?
Is that to me or Steve?
Yeah, no,
right, okay, so...
Go on, any of you.
Is it... Right, so Admiral Byrd, very high up in the military from like the 1920s. He was a pioneer for aviation, to be honest. He was at the time, the only pilot to fly the North Pole and the South Pole.
That's right.
And after he went in like 1929, I think it was, then he went back in the 30s. And the 30s, the US government actually sent him there to an expedition called Operation High Jump, which was, they said was to set up a bit of a research area and stuff. But actually, from what I've read, it's because they wanted to find out what the Nazis knew, because Hitler spent so much time there and had many an expedition there. And they wanted to know what he knew. Hitler was there prior to World War II. That's just another rabbit hole you can go down. But I stumbled on it because I love conspiracy theories. I don't believe them all. I don't say that everything I read or hear is true. But this one just really fascinated me, and there's so much. It's so much in depth. You could cover 3 shows on just this one topic, because there's so much, especially with the Nazis being there. But the Hollow Earth, it's basically where the Hollow Earth theory comes from. And Admiral Byrd, when he died, his son released his diaries of what he witnessed, because the government, when he came back from Operation High Jump, he was sworn to secrecy and basically told he could not speak of it again. That's basically it.
Okay.
So he didn't just turn up with a handful of men either. I mean, when Admiral Byrd and Operation High Jump went to Antarctica, it was 4,700 men, 13 ships and 33 aircraft. So he was prepped, you know, he went tooled up.
Okay, well, we've got a message from Charlie Taylor. Hey guys, you've really made me look forward to Mondays. Keep up the great show. Thank you for that, Charlie Taylor. Let's have a look at Admiral Byrd in action. We've got a clip.
I must say that Admiral Byrd, our guest tonight, is not only our greatest living explorer, but he's been an inspiration to countless Americans. Admiral Byrd, you've been to both the North Pole and the South Pole. Is there any unexplored land left on this Earth that might appeal to adventurous young Americans?
Yes, there is. And not up around the North Pole, because it's getting crowded up there now, because they find out it's really usable, not only to live in, but militarily. But strangely enough, there's left in the world today an area as big as the United States that's never been seen by a human being. And that's beyond the pole, on the other side of the South Pole, from Middle America. And I think it's quite astonishing that there should be an area as big as that unexplored.
That's a tremendous
challenge. There's a lot of adventure left down at the bottom of the world.
Well, Admiral, do you hope to see that?
I do.
Okay, interesting stuff.
Isn't it? It's wonderful.
So tell me about his diary. I'll come to you in a second, Carl, to ask you your views about this. But Steve, why is his diary so important? Is it as important as Jones's?
It's yeah, of course, every other diary is. But his diary is important because he's such a high-profile figure, right? So everything to do that what's documented by Admiral Byrd goes into the annals of history. It's a verified document. But his diaries, his later diaries, tell a different story. Here's now we go deep down the rabbit hole with this. Apparently, when he did get to Antarctica, he was accosted by a number of UFOs. And was taken into a hole through the Antarctic ice into a large cavernous underground with massive cities and aliens and UFOs just wandering about. He was taken to see the Master. This was what the so this basically what happened in the Hollow Earth. He was given a message by the leader who was called the Master. That's how he addressed himself to Admiral Byrd.
Yeah, we got a map of the Hollow Earth on screen now as you're talking.
There it is. So that's where it's. So at the top there, you'll see that where his flight was, and that's where he got taken into Agartha, which is what a lot of people call it as well as Hollow Earth. But this was the message that Admiral Byrd was allegedly given by the Master. He said, "Our interest rightly begins just after your race exploded the first atomic bombs over Hiroshima and Nagasaki in Japan. It was that alarming time we sent our flying machines, the Flugelrads, to your surface world to investigate what your race had done. You see, we have never interfered before in your race wars and barbarity, but now we must, for you have learned to tamper with a certain power that is not for your man, mainly that of atomic energy. Our emissaries have already delivered message to the power of your world, and yet they do not heed." This was a message that he took back after the Operation High Jump was disbanded shortly after because of weather conditions.
That dreaded drastic weather balloon again. Carl, what do you make of the whole Antarctica and the whole Admiral Byrd? Did you get lost down a said rabbit hole like Lindsay did?
Not a bit weirdly, like my. I should probably start by pointing out that I'm in a weird category where I'm quite cynical about most things. I'm open-minded to hearing all about them, and I find them fascinating. But I'm also cynical enough that I never sort of believe anything. But at the same time, I've also had what I would describe as a sort of experience that was unexplained, and I've also had experiences on, like, quite strong hallucinogen therapies where I've experienced things that other people would describe as meeting other species, I suppose, that in different dimensions and stuff. So I'm in a weird category. But I was going to say, with Antarctica, I'm fascinated by it partly because I have, like, my brother's a flat earther, and I know that I'm not at all. But I know that the mystery around it is so big, and because it's such a large landmass, that the fact that it's still in the modern age so unknown, I think leads to so much, speculation. So that's why I find it such a fascinating thing that in an age where we think we've sort of understood everything, that there's still just a big old part of the world that is very, unknown.
Yeah, Lindsay,
there's a landmass that.
Sorry,
there's a land. The one that the Admiral Byrd is discussing there is the landmass was green. It was a green, lush land. That what he saw. This is what he's talking about. He said it just shouldn't have been there. It was a large, vast area as big as the United States that he saw. He claims to have seen mammoths and things like that.
Well, that's what a lot of from knowing my brother and some of the things he's interested in and has shared, and I've sort of I've watched them more out of sort of a morbid curiosity in terms of things like flat Earth and theories, because it's hard not to hear that and think these people are mad. But you watch it, and like a lot of that does talk about why it's so tricky to get permits to do sort of testing there and things like that. Sort of there seems to be a slight deterrence of scientists going there to explore it, and that again feeds into that idea of, is that because there's something that they shouldn't see, or is it for other reasons?
Yeah, exactly. Lindsay, you were kind of telling me today, and I'm fascinated by Garth. I'm fascinated with the idea of hollow Earth, but there's so many anomalies out there when you go searching with regards to Antarctica and Admiral Byrd as well, like the skid mark and can you name some of the other ones as well, the ones that you particularly get your juices flowing?
Yeah, well, there's been so many. I mean, again, like I said to Jim before, there could be a whole show on the images what have been found in Antarctica. There's been alien shaped like UFO discs hidden under the ice. They've found entrances where they're big enough for them to go inside. Same with the submarines as well. Apparently, the Nazis used to have submarines what went into the hollow Earth side through Antarctica underwater. And then you've got they found a face in Antarctica, which is very similar to the face they found on Mars, funnily enough. And obviously the skid mark, and it looks like there's some tanks lined up. There's two on YouTube. You've got Secure Team 10, Tyler, who's got like 2 million followers, and he covers everything. He's done a lot on Antarctica. He's a big believer in it. And I found this other guy called Florida Marquis. And he scours Antarctica constantly, and he's found loads of weird little things. I mean, you go on Google Earth now, and you try and look at Antarctica, it just looks like Google have just painted the whole of Antarctica. It's very, very difficult. I mean, the pyramids are one of the main things what they found in Antarctica, 4-sided pyramids, which is like in Egypt and stuff, which also dates back to like ancient alien stuff as well, where they think the aliens made the pyramids. It shows that there was once a civilization on Antarctica, and they also think that maybe Atlantis, that's where Atlantis is, the lost city of Atlantis. So there's so many. You only have to Google and go on YouTube once to look at any of this stuff, and you'll just see the links to other stuff and other findings. And I spent weeks once completely obsessing. I don't know how much is true, but there's a lot of stuff what backs it up. And you got someone like Admiral Byrd, who's the highest rank. I mean, he had a Medal of Honor and everything. He wasn't like just some soldier who'd been and say, "Oh, I've seen this." And also, as I discussed earlier, Linda Moulton Howe, Ho.
Oh,
You're not listening.
I doubt
she's award-winning journalist and a whistleblower who worked at Antarctica, contacted her, and she did there's a really good documentary, and I can't think what it's called. I don't know if you remember what it's called, Steve. It's the best one I've ever seen, and she explains what this whistleblower told her, that he went to do some research, a team went further afield, and they were missing for a week, and when they got a signal, he went to collect them, and they were that terrified, none of them would speak of it. And if I recall, Steve, you may know this, Buzz Aldrin actually once went to Antarctica and described it as a place of terror or something. It's horrific. And that's, he's been to space. And he's,
I'll be honest with you, anything below 15 degrees is horrific for me.
Maybe not then, but he did.
With regards to Antarctica...
Yeah, well, the thing is, they know more about the moon than they do about the Earth. And that's worrying. They know more about the composition of the moon than they do the Earth. So how do you know that there isn't a hollow Earth inside there?
We don't, but we believe. We absolutely believe. That's why you're all on this show. With regards to, this idea, as you said, you don't sit on the fence, but you want to believe more than anything. You know what I mean? But you question everything as well. When it comes to testimonies from the likes of, Admiral Byrd, and the fact that he is a man at the top of his game, he is a man that can be trusted, that he's legendary within, regardless of this anyway. Do you think you think we have to believe these people in power, these people that have no reasons to lie?
I think I'd always find myself still sitting. I'm a lifelong fence sitter. I don't know if I should be proud of that, but I'm so cynical of people in power, even if they're saying things that go against the normal sort of like ideas, the sort of the policies they're pushing, like even the ones that come out and go against that and say, no, this isn't what's happening, this is what's happening. I'm always thinking, at the moment there's a disparity of ideas, I always think it's dangerous to just believe and go, right, that's what's happening. So as much as I find myself reading about stuff like Atlantis, you mentioned Atlantis, Lindsay. I went through a real Atlantis phase in my mid-teens where I was reading so much about it, and I remember Antarctica being one of the big theories, and I just always think it's good. I always treat it just with a sense of fun, and I would like it to be true. But I also am not going to, as with religion, I think I'm spiritual, and I believe there is other things at play. Yeah, but I think it's the safe. I always think it's just the safest bet to be agnostic and be slightly on the fence and think, well, that probably could be the case.
Yeah, it's interesting that you mentioned about spirituality, then, Carl, because in many spiritual practices, when they're telling you to relax and to breathe and stuff, they're asking you to center yourself to the center of the earth, a hollow earth, as such. So there could be something that belies in that spirituality comes from a place of truth as well. Steve, what's the most exciting thing for you about this whole Admiral Byrd Antarctica thing? We've not heard too much from you. What is the thing that, for you, that really gets your goat going about it all?
Well, just basically because he is so high up. And he said that he's met aliens, he's conversed with aliens, and he's witnessed alien technology. But I have a bit of an issue with Hollow Earth, right? If you just bear with me, right? So it's basically, if you've got a hole that goes right through the center of the Earth and pops out the other side, eventually you're just going to hang in the middle. Do you know what I mean? You'll go. So if you jumped into the hole, you'd fall, and then you'd come back the way because gravity would get hold of you. Then you'd fall back again, and then eventually you'd just stay hung in the middle in sort of like a sort of zero gravity space. Do you know what I mean? You couldn't get all the way through. And do you know, I was doing a tour in Afghanistan, and I was on one of the refueling planes. And they were talking us through the refueling process of the planes that were coming on, and I said to one of the guys with pilots, and I said, look, I've got a really stupid question. And he said, oh, there's no such thing as a stupid question here, son. There's no such thing. And I said, well, why can't you just take your plane up and hover and then wait for the Earth to come round to where you want to go, and then just land on it. It's really he's like, "Oh, fuck off."
Yeah. Okay, yeah. Another message from Charlie Taylor Head. She says hello from South Africa before. She's also saying folding space. Does that mean anything to you, Steve?
You can't do it more than 8 times.
It's like an Astro version of Benetton, all that folding. Moving swiftly on, Lindsay's back with us. She just went off then. You all right, Lindsay, love? Did you
hello?
Did you get beamed up or something?
Yes, sorry guys. I'm having technical difficulties with getting the screen, and it keeps going crackly as well. So not
right.
I think my daughters might be using the internet, even though I told them not to.
Okay, well,
we should have had a tech show this afternoon, shouldn't we?
I think we should just lock them out when we do it. Let's just lock them outside. It's still warm.
It is still warm. Speaking of warm, speaking of one of the hottest stories ever to grace the ufology world and the extraterrestrial world is this one. Let's take a look at a clip. It needs no introduction.
Dr. Simon interviewed Betty and Barney separately and together, and then he began 6 months of separate hypnosis sessions.
Dr. Simon uses a then revolutionary technique known as hypnotic regression, a process by which Betty and Barney are put under a trance and then are encouraged to recall memories that are not available to the conscious mind.
When I have a person in hypnotic regression, they'll relive this experience.
Dr. Simon uncovers shocking facts about the first ever modern account of an alien abduction.
I believe this is a flying saucer. I can see it tilted toward me. All right. That's all. Let us wait, Steve.
It was very frightening because they saw these beings approach the car, and they took them out of the car and led them into the craft.
Okay, one of the most
exciting. It's my favourite one.
Wow. Is it? Why
it's
is
my favourite one for lots of different reasons. Because first of all, it was a mixed race couple in the 60s. They didn't need any unwanted attention really, and they went public with it. Nobody had heard about alien abductions up till then, and it made big news, and it opened the floodgates to let other people who had these experiences come forward and talk about it. And they still, right up until I think, was it Betty died first, or was it Barney? I can't remember, not sure. Right until the death. Yeah, Barney, he was still maintained that they were taken by aliens as well, and it was the typical small greys, and there was not much about it then. Communion wasn't out by then. The small grey was never really Skinny Bobby, nobody even heard of him.
Wow. What do you think about Betty and Barney, Lindsay?
I only know brief stuff on Betty and Barney. I know it was I think for the time there was a black man and a white woman being in a relationship in the 60s. It was difficult for them at the time, so to expose themselves with so much publicity around that time, it had to have taken a lot. So they must have been quite sure. I mean, they weren't sure what went on, was they just knew they lost 2 hours of time as they were driving home. And it was the hypnosis, wasn't it? And the regression, what brought more things to light. I do, I think there's definitely something in it. And around that time, there was a lot of stuff still going on around Area 51, around Roswell. That was still quite rife at the time. So, it's possible. I don't have much evidence of it, but I do believe that something happened to them. Definitely.
Yeah, because again, it goes back to what I posed to Carl just before when we were talking about Admiral Byrd before, this idea of why would these people lie? It goes back to our show last week, Steve, when we were talking about the 62 school children in Rua with their incident. In this day and age, 1961, with a couple like Betty and Barney Hill, who, for all want of a better word, try to play everything under the radar because segregation and biracial marriage was biracial coupling was still frowned upon, in those days. Why would people like it? Because they wouldn't. This is my point. Carl, what do you think?
Sorry, I'm just going to say Barney was a postal worker, wasn't he? And Betty was a social worker.
Yeah.
So they were in quite high-end jobs at that time as well, where they were trusted with.
They were very respectable,
Yeah, that's what I mean. They were a respectable couple. I mean, the only Barney and Betty I'd heard of since then was the Flintstones. You know, that was it. But yeah, I think because of the jobs as well, they weren't like hidden away. They weren't like two nutcases who've just come forward and.
Yeah, but saying that, he did, you know, for want of a better word, you know, it affected Barney, who was a solid stoic, you know, gentleman. He went to pieces, didn't he? He turned to alcohol. He ended up, you know, having to see psychiatrists and, you know, kind of lived the latter part of his life in strife, really. Did you know about
that's the case, I think I've been abducted.
Carl, did you know about Betty and Barney Hill? Or is this
no, I hadn't. No, not at all. But again, it's that I totally understand that thing of weirdly in this case, you know, it's that thing. I always believe that you believe it. Do you know what I mean? It's that thing of I know I'm in a very similar position of having I went off and I went and drank ayahuasca with a shaman, and I've done things where I've experienced stuff that when I've tried to relay it to other people and they know me as a cynical sort of, you know, probably it's just me going a bit bonkers or something. Like I've told them what I went through and said, no, there was parts of it that were outside of the actual psychedelic part of it.
Yeah.
You know, that actually I experienced things I cannot explain. And like, you know, I think sometimes the story of somebody you like them who would, you know, it's just a normal middle of the road couple, even taking them out of the context of being a mixed race or interracial couple in the 60s, you know, they're still just, you know, most normal, you know, boring middle America types, you know, who wouldn't have wanted to draw attention to themselves. And the fact that they clearly fully believed it makes me that they're the thing that put the little bits of doubt in my mind of, well, you know, there must have been something crazy happen.
No financial gain ever.
Totally.
Why did they delve into hypnotism, Steve? If they didn't have any financial gain for it, why was it to put the pieces of the jigsaw together? What happened?
Because they had missing time. What they realized was they heard as they drove away from the craft, they heard some beeps, and then they heard another succession of beeps, and that's when they came round and realised they were 35 miles away from where they should have been from that point.
Yeah.
But they kept having nightmares as well, and eventually they started to tell people what had happened, and it got round to a person who dealt with this before, and then regressed them, and then you get the story about their abduction, and the full story about these 3 to 5 alien beings that came around. But so when they saw the actual craft, it was between 8 and 11. They can't recall. But Barney didn't see them. It was Betty that saw the actual beings in the craft. Barney just basically shat his pants and said, "Just get back in the car." But by this point, they'd already had them.
You know, Barney. What happened to Barney was he was outside. She was in the car. She could see it, and it was Barney that saw it. He had his binoculars, and he was trying to take his binoculars down because what he could see was so terrifying, kind of like people looking out of portals on the ship. And he was saying to himself, "Take my binoculars down," and he physically he couldn't do it. And then when he was found, they noticed that the thick leather strap on his binocular case had been literally torn in half, and Betty's dress had like a pink smudgy dust all over it that kind of corroded the fabric as well.
Yeah.
A bit like Monica Lewinsky, you know.
He said it was a plane that wasn't a plane, so that because he was talking last week about people's frames of reference, and Barney's only explanation of it was a plane that wasn't a plane. So that's he's no way. If you can see a UFO that's flying, it's not got wings, but it's actually flying.
Yeah,
it's a plane. That's the only thing he knows that flies at this point is a plane. So he said it was a plane that wasn't a plane.
Yeah. Lindsay and Carl, the grey aliens. So they're very, so just correct me if I'm wrong, Steve. So the aliens that they saw are typical greys, yeah?
Yeah, there was two types. From what I think, if I can remember correctly, I think there was short greys and tall greys. And it was the short greys that they awoke to.
Okay, cool. What's your take on grey alien? So Skinny Bob there, Stephen rolled in his little bum, Skinny Bob up there. What's your take on grey aliens and alien races as well? I mean, obviously this is an image that we see everywhere. I mentioned it, you type alien into your phone now, you get the alien emoji, and it looks like a grey, looks like Skinny Bob as well. Would you like to kind of meet a grey alien? What would you say to him,
I'd love to meet one. I've some of these strange experiences I've had. I feel like I've met some odd things.
Yeah.
I've never seen a grey alien. But that's one of the things I always find myself trying to work out how cynical I am in terms of believing. When you get independent people saying the same thing where they haven't got a way of knowing each other's story. So there was obviously versions of that story where people described a similar thing before the internet, where there was widespread descriptions of that type of alien. So that's when again you start thinking, well, it doesn't seem to make sense that a number of people in different parts of the world have described the same thing without any link between them, how they could have shared that information.
And it's
obviously now you could argue, that it's sort of now widespread enough. You could say now when people say it could be bullshit, but you go back to the time before the widespread information, and there are descriptions from various people that seem to match up.
And there are petroglyphs that are 10,000 years old.
Yeah,
you look at some of the petroglyphs in ancient history. There's depictions of greys all over the place, tall greys and the short greys with the big eyes. These are in 14,000 years old petroglyphs. They're thousands of years old. Some of them hundreds of thousands of years old. So these are the early photographs of aliens and UFOs. In fact, I think next week's show we'll probably look at that ancient petroglyphs and depictions of UFOs and aliens. In that, it'd be a great show.
Yeah, Charlie says there's no smoke without fire. Very quickly, just wanted to go back to you then, Carl, with regards to, you mentioned before you've done kind of psychotherapy, kind of ayahuasca and stuff. But I don't know if you've done DMT and stuff. But I've
done DMT a number of times.
Amazing. And they also say that, people who do DMT or kind of go on those trips see a very similar being as well, almost like a green goblin kind of.
Yeah, I didn't see it physically. Weirdly, like my DMT experience, I've had quite a few, but not for quite a few years. I went through a period of doing it, and I had a couple of experiences on it that were your classic feeling like you had been sort of transported to another place, and there was a sense that you were surrounded by a different type of being. And also I remember the first time I did it, I had a definite sense when I was there that I shouldn't be there, that they weren't saying it like physically or in English. I just kept getting this sense they were sort of saying to me, mate, you shouldn't really be here. And it was such an overwhelming feeling that when I got back to my body, it was so scary, I suppose. It shook me up for weeks. The first time I did DMT, I went vegan straight away because for some reason when I came back to my body, I had this weird sense that it suddenly gave me a sense of connection to everything, right? And I tended to see myself as much smaller.
It puts you in touch with the Akashic records because you start vibrating at a certain frequency on an atomic level, and that's when you hit the Akashic records, which is connected to everything in the universe.
Well, that's what it felt like. It was so bizarre. Like I genuinely, I was out for maybe 10 minutes physically, and I felt like I'd been gone for, I'm not messing around when I say about 6-7 weeks. Wow. When I woke up, I remember looking around the room and realizing I was still in the same room and being confused as to how I could still be there, having been gone for that long. And I was like checking myself to see I'd not grown a beard and things. It was it was insane, and I feel mad talking about it, but it's how it panned out.
Have any of you had sleep paralysis?
Yes.
Had it yesterday in the garden.
Horrific. I've had 3 horrific.
Can you explain what happened?
Well, the first one was the worst. It was about 10 years ago. I took the kids to school, come home, just fell asleep on the couch. I woke up and all I felt was that my body was picked up and thrown across the room. And the next minute I was thrown back, and then I landed on the couch and I woke up, but I was still in the same environment as was that a dream? What was that? But I felt in pain, like I'd actually been physically attacked. The second time something was sat on my chest, which is a very common one apparently. some like demon type. Now, I don't believe this to be alien. I think sleep paralysis is what sleep paralysis is. You know, I mean, it's like your brain wakes up before your body does, doesn't it? But for some reason, you always seem to have these horrific images. You know, it's like, why can't I have some fit guy at the end of my bed? You know what? Why does it always have to be like a demon sat on my chest? And the third time I heard voices talking to me as well, which was more terrifying than seeing it. It's never happened since. I mean, I will say at the time, I was on a lot of like sleeping tablets and stuff. I was a terrible insomniac. So I think the lack of sleep, I mean, that can make you go crazy in itself. But I know it is an actual thing. I've spoken to it. It's very common as well.
I was about to say just quickly, if anyone's interested in that sort of, you know, sleep wake sort of different levels of consciousness thing, I went through a phase of practicing lucid dreaming, and it's not that difficult to get to a point when you do lucid dream. You know, it took me just probably a few weeks of committed practice before I had my first one, and once you start doing it, I only did it very briefly because it's pretty. Well, it's weird. It's overwhelming. It feels like it felt like something I shouldn't be messing with. Weirdly,
yeah. I do it a lot. I lucid dream a lot, and I practice lucid dreaming as well because there's some fantastic stuff on YouTube and astral travel. And you mentioned before, Lindsay, about getting up at 3 o'clock in the morning. I will often set my alarm so I can bang. Normally Michael Seeley or someone like that. Bang them in and try and get there. And once, Steve, I vibrated within an inch of my life, and it was literally a split second that it happened. But it wasn't just a shake; it's a completely different. It's something I could never. What you mean? Yeah, and it took weeks. But I completely agree. Lucid dreaming is
that's very.
It's full on.
That's very much like what they call now. I mean, Steve watched something recently actually. Documentary with Stephen Greer, Dr. Stephen Greer. And it was basically the fifth kind. So you got your third kind, fourth kind. This is the fifth kind, and it's where you do that type of astral projection. You meditate, but you invite the aliens to come to you.
Well, it's your way of contacting.
Yeah. It's like the opposite way. Instead of them, you're visiting them astrally. But
doing the lucid dreaming that you was on about.
Yes, but to contact them, and when they did it on the documentary, they said they could see that flashed back at them. They flashed a torch in the sky, and like a UFO flashed back at them. I don't know how true that is, but it's like a new thing they're doing now. Very fascinating.
The queen of all astral travel is Shirley MacLaine, who's written many books, and you know Shirley MacLaine will speak in interviews even now. Will speak in interviews about, you know, her friends in the skies. So check out Shirley MacLaine because, you know, not only is she a fantastic actress, but she is one of the biggest advocates for alien life and interdimensional life as well.
Right.
And also another great book. Sorry, just before another great book is True Hallucinations by Terence McKenna. Which everybody should read. Read that book because it's about how to with the ayahuasca thing and how to get into that, how to tap into the Akashic records, and it's great. He was from Buffalo University, accredited. I think he's dead now, but his interviews and lectures are still on YouTube.
Yeah, I've listened to them. They're great.
Maybe we should do a special show on DMT. Get everyone back and we'll do DMT live.
I'd love to do it. I can't empty my brain. I can't empty my mind to concentrate enough. I've tried to meditate many times. I just can't.
There's too much crap going on up here. Doing the dishes.
There's too much going on.
Carl, tell us about your. I mean, you know, we were chatting before, and you mentioned that you yourself have had an experience of sorts. Can you fill us in on that for the last 5 minutes?
Yes, I mean it's totally something I can't. I've only ever had one relatively sort of simple explanation that's made me go, all right, it could have potentially been that. Apart from that, it still remains one of the strangest events of my life. I was driving back from a gig maybe 8 years ago, and I was living in Sussex at the time, just south of London, in a place called Horsham, which is quite a small town, probably like half an hour south of London. But to get to it, you have to come off like the motorway, and then you just go down some nice quiet A roads. And it's a bit, it's about a 15-minute drive down quiet roads. And I was coming back on a Sunday night, late from a gig. And so, it was dead. No one drives around on Sunday night in deep, dark Sussex. And I basically was coming off the motorway, and as I probably got about 5 minutes into that country road drive, I saw this sort of flash of what felt like lightning. But I mean, this was a summer night and there was no rain, so I just thought, oh, it's going to rain. And then I saw it again in the distance, but I couldn't see it. It felt like it was sort of lighting up the clouds, and I thought, oh, it's obviously above the clouds. There's a bit of cloud cover. It's lightning. Carried on driving, and as I was driving for a few minutes, it felt like every time there was a flash, I was driving closer to the flash, so I could see that I'm driving towards where this flash was coming from, and I started getting a little weird, you know, and you're sort of just something feels off, and I could see I was probably, you know, a couple of minutes away from it. And I started getting a bit nervous. There was a big roundabout I had to turn off, and there was no other cars. This was the annoying thing. I hadn't seen another car in a while. That probably added to the sense of sort of something's weird's happening. As I got, I felt very isolated as well. So I got to this roundabout. As I turned left, I could see that a long field running to the right of me. The flash was coming from the field, and it was behind the trees. Like I could see just massive sort of weird thing emitting light, and it was really the flash. The reason I could see it across the cloud cover was because it was like the light was hitting the underneath of the clouds, and it was sort of lighting up like that. So again, I was driving along this road, and I could see where I was coming up to the source of it, and I started shitting myself. I was really sort of scared, but I also had to slow down to see what was going on. And as I slowed down along sort of side it, I could see it was quite a full tree line, but behind it was essentially what looked like a sort of ball of lightning. You know, so it was actual actual sort of as if imagine you see a massive generator that was about to explode and all sort of lightning's coming off it. It was essentially looked like it was that, but it was a field. There's not a power station now. I drove past it 150 times. So, and I started thinking about getting out of the car. And I was about to get out, and then it just sort of big flash again just behind the trees, and I just jumped in the car and drove home. Got home about 10 minutes later, and my wife, this was my ex-wife now, but she not because of this, just to clarify. She said I walked through the door looking like I'd seen a ghost. I was really shaken up, and we spent about 2 or 3 hours. I couldn't sleep, obviously. We were just searching every bit of social media for someone else who saw it. I was trying every format of words, lightning, electricity, whatever. Not a single person. And then I probably told it to a handful of people in the coming weeks, and then everyone thought I was mad. So I sort of left it be. And then weirdly, a couple of years ago, I can't remember who it was. It was a comedian who has some scientific degree. We were drinking after a gig, and we were talking about aliens, and I sort of said this story, and he said that he had heard of a thing called ball lightning, which was what it potentially could be. And I looked at it online, and I've seen videos, and there's a chance it could, but I've never seen a video that looks anywhere near the size of this. I mean, if it would be ball lightning, if a ball lightning was the size of a field.
Ball lightning is generally about the same size as a basketball.
Yeah, and this was the same size.
Bigger than that. Yeah. I saw exactly the same thing, and this was, and again, no media coverage. I thought this was going to be massive, and it was about 8 years ago, funnily enough, and it was over Halifax.
Right.
And it was a full moon, a bright full moon, and just underneath it was another full moon, half the size of what the full moon looked like, and it flashed. And then shot down to the size of like a basketball, and then shot right down, very much like the Dome of the Rock UFO, you know, the one that happened in Israel. And it shot down over over Halifax. And I was watching this driving back from a gig on the 62, and then it hung over for about 5 seconds, and then flashed again, and then went back to where it was, and then swelled to about 10 times its size again. And it just was mind blowing. I never really told anybody because it was so mad.
Yeah.
But I had one person that did see it, so I did have a witness, and I thought, well, I'll just leave it because that's going to make the news. Nothing.
Yeah, that's what I was so confused, because like the amount of light it was emitting, I saw it for a good 2 minutes while driving at 70 miles an hour down this country lane, like a little A road. And by the time I got to it, and then by the time I was driving away from it, it was still going off in my rearview mirror. So there was probably a 5 or 6 minute period where it looked like the whole sky was lighting up from this light. And I just never found anything about it online. And that was the thing that really bothered me because I'd not drunk for weeks. I was sober. I'd not done any funny business.
No DMT.
This was long before the ayahuasca years.
One for the book, Carl. Guys, we're going to have to stop you there. We've come down. We could talk for hours on this. I hope
Carl, we could go forever with this one.
Yeah, I hope you both come back on the show soon.
Yeah,
Steve, what we're going to be looking at next week? What you thinking? Well,
I'm not too sure now. But earlier today, I was thinking about ancient depictions of UFOs and aliens in ancient history and petroglyphs and stuff like that, because then it can lead into all sorts of texts.
Yeah.
But we'll see. Maybe we'll have people on and talk about their experiences, because they're really exciting. And they're my experience and Carl's experience, and what people want to hear, want to listen to, because they've had their own experience. So maybe you guys that are watching this show, why don't you send us in your experiences? You can email me at timebanditman@googlemail.com.
We should change that email address.
It's embarrassing. It's timebanditman@googlemail.com. And if you've got an experience, you'll come on the show and we can talk about it.
Definitely.
And put it out there.
Well, you're doing a podcast as well, aren't you, for Project Grey?
Yeah.
So for people who's had experiences, yeah.
Cool,
so,
good.
Anybody that's had a good experience.
Guys, it's been a pleasure, and thank you guys at home for watching as well.
Thanks very much.
Bye, Carl. Nice to see you again, Lindsay.
Cheers.
And if you do want to come on the show, please leave a comment. Please leave us a comment about anything, whether you think we're good, whether something's kind of, triggered something in your brain about what we've been talking about, and especially if you've experienced your own abduction or your own UFO sighting. Steve, I'll leave the final word to you.
Thanks for watching the show. Spread it around if you see the link, post it. Let's build the audience and let's get this worldwide.
Keep watching. We'll see you next week, guys. 7:00.
Bye. Thank you.